Hi, I'm Jamie Scarborough. I'm founding partner of Sales Talent Agency, and I'm excited today to walk you through our definitive guide for making a great sales hire. We as sales leaders, we think we know the cost of a bad hire. Well, yes, there is a financial cost, the amount of money that it costs us to bring the hire on in the first place, but also the financial cost of training, onboarding, and even paying that person throughout their tenure with you. But there's also a time cost. You know you're investing a lot of time, not only in bringing them on board, but you're also investing a lot of mental time because we spend so much time going home at night and thinking about these horrible hires that we made. We talk to our peers about them, we talk to our spouses about them, and they just cost us so much time. What we don't often think about is the opportunity cost. For sales, that's massive. Whenever you've got someone who's not great in the marketplace, who's a C player as opposed to an A player, you are automatically losing market share and opportunity. And the final thing that you always have to keep in mind is the culture of your organization. When you make a bad hire, not only does it bring down the culture of your business, because good people don't really like being surrounded by bad sales professionals. They want to be surrounded by elite sales professionals, but you've also got to think about the culture shock when you actually have to let them go and how negative that can be for an organization. So how do you make a good hire? We believe there are 4 key things that you have to think about, and a simple acronym for you is FACE. Find, that means lifting up the rocks to look for those people. Attract, that means converting those people to being someone that wants to work for your organization or wants to consider working for your organization. Choosing the right person who's going to be there not just short term but long term and is going to be successful. And then finally equipping them for success, making sure that they have everything they need to be a long-term fit. So we're going to start with choose. Because we think we know how to make good choices as hiring managers, but oftentimes you'll find that you and your peers ask very different things, have very different criteria of what you think makes a good salesperson. Well, at Sales Talent Agency, we've spent 8 years interviewing salesperson after salesperson, looking at different company metrics, and really analyzing what it takes to be successful. And we've divided sales professionals and what it takes to be good into 2 key areas. Talent, that's the raw thing that they had at 17 and they also have at 70. And then experience, that's the thing that you pay for. You know, you'll hire someone who's talented with no experience at $35,000 a year, but if you're going to pay $90,000 a year, you're expecting them to ramp up fast because they've got the right experience that's going to make it a quick and easy transition. So let's start thinking about talent. Talent for us is DNA, drive. Well, okay, we all think we know what drive is, but what we're really looking for in drive is a mix of a hard work ethic, a really good workhorse, but combine that with someone who's resilient. As a salesperson, you have to be able to get back up when you've been knocked down, and so you've got to find someone who's got those traits. A great question to ask when you're looking at drive is, tell me a time when you've set a challenging goal for yourself and now tell me what you did to achieve that goal. You'll find that truly driven people consistently set challenging goals personally, professionally, educationally, and they'll consistently make everything they need to do to get it right. So now you've got this fantastic driven salesperson, but actually you'll know that sometimes drive can be dangerous. You can have a really, really hard-working salesperson, but they can be incredibly damaging to your organization if they don't have the next thing, which is nature. And when we're talking about nature, we're specifically referring to emotional intelligence and empathy. Empathetic people think about people around them. They're a pleasure to work with. They're a pleasure to buy from. They're on time. They're well presented. They ask great questions. They listen. They are really have got everything they need to be a good partner to your client. So great, you've got someone who's hardworking, who's resilient with drive. You've got someone who's likable and who's thoughtful with nature. But boy, we're living in a world where we're doing solution sales. It's no longer enough just to pitch a product. We have to create a solution, which means we have to be consultants. And so now you need to have acumen, particularly business acumen. Well, what is business acumen? Especially if you're 17, do you really have any business acumen? It's more about the potential for acumen. We want someone who's got the ability to be able to go out and become an expert at something. Being an expert takes hard work, drive, but it really takes intelligence and wanting to learn, wanting to be a sponge. So you're really looking for someone here who is going to do everything they can to become an expert, to learn more about sales as a process, to understand more about your competition, your company, your products, your services, your clients. They're going to be a sponge for information and just absorb it quickly as they can. So if you can find someone with high D, N, and A, whether they're 17 or 70, they're probably going to be successful at some point, but you need them to be successful immediately. So now you've got to look at their PRO. This is the experience that is going to help you make sure they ramp up in a relatively good time. P is performance history. As salespeople, we're very highly measured. So what we're looking for here is some key metrics that show that not only have they been a salesperson, but they've been a great salesperson. They've consistently made targets, they've consistently ranked well amongst their peers, and they've always done a great job with the opportunities available to them. The next thing we're looking for is relevancy. It's fantastic that they were the best realtor in the world, but that isn't necessarily relevant to our sales process, our client base, and what we're selling. We need someone who's got something similar. Maybe they've sold a similar sales process before, maybe they've sold a similar kind of technology or a similar product suite, or maybe they've sold to a similar decision maker, but something there has to make sense, relevant sense for them to move forward. The final thing in PRO is opportunity management. Boy, do we make some mistakes on this. We've got to think of a candidate and think, well, why is this, ours, the right opportunity for them in their career? We'll sometimes hire people that are way too experienced for the job on paper and then wonder why they aren't successful in the role because they're not that good or they are way beyond that opportunity. What you really want to see here is someone who's had a clear progression in their career. You want them to be taking obvious next steps. You want to make sure that they haven't jumped from job to job, from industry to industry. Ideally, they've had at least 2 to 3 years with each company. We know that the average amount of time someone stays with a company now is 1.7 years. That is way too short for us to get a great return on investment. So what are we going to do? We've got to make sure that this next step is an obvious one that should keep them there for 3, 5, or 10 years. So now you've got DNA Pro, we know how to analyze Pro, look at their resume, do their interviews, but how do you analyze DNA? Well, it's really hard and there's a lot of tools that we can have and we'll show you a couple in a second, but there's a couple of interview things that we think are imperative. And one of them is the world's greatest interview question. How did you prepare for this meeting today? If you think about that question, it seems so simple, but if you ask someone in front of you who could look great, who could have all the energy and enthusiasm you want, but if they break down and didn't do their research on you as a company, well, why would they do any research on their client? They're selling themselves. That's the most important product they're ever going to sell. And if they've not put in the time to prepare for that meeting, why would they ever put in the time to prepare for a meeting with one of your clients? It also shows how much drive and energy they've put in to preparing themselves for your interview. Well, great. There's a bunch of things we can do in the interview process, a bunch of questions that we can ask, but we always like to recommend doing one final step before you ever make that hire, and that is to give those finalists an assignment. An assignment is a great way to help you analyze DNA because by giving them a few key things to do on their own time and to come back to present to you, they're going to not only show a great work ethic by how much work they put into it, they're going to show a great amount of nature because they're going to be presenting in front of you and you're going to have a chance to not just listen, but also provide critical feedback and you're going to see how they take that critical feedback. Guess what? Unempathetic people don't take feedback well. So by taking feedback well and implementing it immediately, you're probably on the right track. The final thing you're going to get is obviously how much research and effort and intelligence they've put into that assignment. That's going to give you a great opportunity to make a good decision. Okay? So finally, we want you to think about, well, look, if your Google you've got all the money in the world and you've got an amazing brand. Everyone wants to work for you. So you can afford the very, very best there is. Someone with a massive amount of talent, but also a ton of experience. But guess what? We're not Google and neither are you. So you're going to have to make some compromises when you recruit. Our recommendation is always to compromise on the experience side and never compromise on the DNA. If you can consistently make sure you hire someone with high drive, nature, and acumen, and if you're prepared to sacrifice a little bit on experience, you will have a better long-term success as long as you equip that candidate for success and have a good manager who's going to teach them how to do a job. The final thing we want to talk about with choosing candidates is the idea that DNA Pro is not a methodology. It's not an interview style. It's not a performance tool. It is literally a bunch of key criteria that we think you should be using no matter what other style of interview you do. Whether it's top grading, whether it's DISC assessments, whether it's PI, whether it's in-person interviews, panel interviews, phone screening, whether it's background checks or whether it is reference checks. All of those things should be done with an eye to work out, are they driven? Have they got great nature? Have they got business acumen? Have they got a strong performance history? Is it relevant to what we're doing? And have they managed the opportunities of their career well? So great. You've made a fantastic choice. But guess what? The majority of bad hires we make are because of laziness. Yes, we've got a great understanding of what we want now, but now we've got to go and find those people, and it's not easy to find great candidates. It's going to take a lot of work. And there's so many different tools that are out there, it can be very confusing. The first thing you want to think about is what kind of candidate are you looking for? Well, if you think about it, there are 3 stages that every person is within a job. They are either very happy with their job, in which case they're completely inactive, they don't want any other job. You may be able to offer them $1 million and it would sway their head. But for the most part, any realistic opportunity, any realistic offer would not move them from their organization. So let's take those guys out of the equation. Now we're coming down to very active candidates. Those are the ones that are really aggressively looking for a job, either because they don't have one right now or because they really hate the one they're in, or someone who's what we call passive candidate. They probably have loved their job, but you know what? Something's just changed a little bit. Maybe they're getting a little bit bored. Maybe they're feeling a little bit underappreciated. Maybe some things are changing where they don't feel that there's an obvious next step for them in their career. Those are the candidates that typically end up being your best hires if you can get them at the right time. But guess what? Just like anything else in a sales process, you've got to get them at the right time. So you have to treat recruitment like a sales function within your organization. To make a good hire, you have to lift up a lot of rocks. Well, you can always use someone like Sales Talent Agency and we'll do that work for you. But you know what? If you put in the time yourself, you can do it. If you think of LinkedIn now, if you think of these resume databases, if you think of Google as basically a yellow pages, this has got a bunch of names, a bunch of people in there. You're just going to have to do the dialing and actually get them on the phone and make sure you connect with them. It's a lot of work, but boy, will it make a big difference in how big your candidate pool is. Nothing helps you make a better choice than by having a really big pool of good candidates. So, okay, we know how to make a choice. We know we've got to do a lot of work to get those candidates. But guess what? Good candidates, especially those passive candidates, have lots of choice available to them. Do you think you're the only company looking for them? You're not. So you're going to have to turn their head. They have got choice available to them, and you're going to have to attract them to your organization. So what are you going to do? Well, the first thing you're going to do is have a really good value proposition. You've got to think about the questions that salespeople have. Why should they work for you? How much money are they going to make? Where are you going to be measured? And how is your career path going to be run? How much commissions am I going to have, and how does that work? What does my career look like 3, 4, 5 years from now? You've got to have answers to all of these great questions, and it's not like that candidate's going to ask you those in the first meeting, especially not if they're good. You've got to be ready to be able to feed them a very good narrative that's true, but also extremely positive about your organization, so that when they're looking at 3 different companies, they're considering you as their number one pick. Okay, so you've made a good choice with DNA Pro. You've lifted up a lot of rocks with Find. You've even got to the point where you've got a pretty good idea of how to attract people. Well, guess what? Now you've got that fantastic salesperson. They've signed on the dotted line. They're going to start with your organization. And you know what? You've got to equip them for success. Remember that 1.7 years? We're going to stretch that to 3, 5, or 10 years, and it's going to start right now. How are you going to onboard that person? How is their compensation looking? Is it fair? Is it in line with what everyone else in the market is paying? And is it clear? Nothing is more confusing to a salesperson than not knowing how much they make on a given deal. Give them a really good, clean, understandable compensation structure that fairly rewards their success and their hard work. But that's not enough. If you think of a good salesperson as being a soldier, you've got to give them armor. You've got to give them orders. You've got to give them communication. You've got to give them competitive analysis. You have to help them be successful. Otherwise, they'll be limited in their success. Yeah, they'll be great. Maybe they can do a good job. You may have even hired people before who came on board and quickly hit the ground running. But you know what? Think about what they could have done if you'd actually put a little bit more effort into making sure they had the tools they needed to do a great job. A simple CRM that is designed to help them, not just give data back to you, the leader. They need marketing materials. They need a team around them of people that they can share ideas. And they also need a good career path. A salesperson needs to understand that it's not just sales for life. There is an opportunity as they do well for them to progress in their career. Doesn't have to be management, could be key accounts, could be national accounts. It does need to be quite clear for them as well. What's more important than engaged management? You are their managers. I have been a manager for the last 10 years and I know what a difference it makes when you actually spend real time and invest a lot of energy in making sure a salesperson is successful. Yes, there's lots of techniques for great management, but it's simple. If someone's brand new, you want to give them a very tight reins and you want to really make sure that they can't break everything around them. And as they progress, you want to make sure their reins come off a little bit, until you're really at a point where you're supporting them. You're doing everything to get all of the problems out of their path. Final point is have a unique and compelling value proposition. If you ask all of your team members today, what is our value proposition? I bet you'll hear 5, 10 different answers. Well, it's your job to make sure that there's one really good answer. You've got to make sure that we're all on the same page. And what are you going to do that? That's it. Face. Find, attract, choose, equip. That is our definitive guide to making a great sales hire. My name is Jamie Scarborough, for the love of sales.